The sun was beating down hard on the Carolina rest stop that summer afternoon. The air felt thick and heavy, making even the simplest movements feel like a chore. A young girl, no more than 12, sat quietly at one of the weathered picnic tables, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. Her bright yellow summer dress stood out against the dull gray of the concrete, and her braided hair was neatly tied with matching yellow ribbons. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like a normal father-daughter road trip stop. The man sitting across from her kept a pleasant smile on his face, occasionally reaching over to pat her shoulder in what appeared to be a fatherly gesture. But something wasn't quite right about the scene. "Sweetie, aren't you hungry? Daddy got your favorite sandwich," the man said, pushing a wrapped sub toward her. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it that made her stomach turn. She wasn't hungry, couldn't be hungry, not when every instinct in her body was screaming that she needed to get away. The rest stop was busy with summer travelers. Families with kids piled out of minivans, truckers stretched their legs after long hours on the road, and tourists consulted maps and phones for directions. The constant flow of people should have been comforting, but it only made her feel more alone. How could so many people be so close, yet no one noticed that something was wrong? She watched a mother help her toddler drink from a water fountain, wishing she could catch her eye. Two teenage boys walked past, absorbed in their phones. A group of elderly travelers gathered around a map near their tour bus. Everyone seemed to be in their own world, hurrying to their next destination. The man who called himself her father kept checking his phone, his fingers drumming nervously on the wooden table. Every time a state trooper's car passed on the highway, his shoulders would tense slightly. He positioned them perfectly, close enough to others to not draw attention, but far enough that no one could overhear their conversation. "Remember what we talked about?" he said quietly, his eyes scanning the parking lot. "We're going to visit your aunt in Florida. If anyone asks, you tell them how excited you are about Disney World." His words seemed friendly enough, but the underlying threat was clear in his tone. She nodded automatically, the way she'd been doing for the past few hours. Her real home was nowhere near Florida. It was back in Charlotte, where her mom was probably sick with worry by now. The thought of her mother made her throat tight, but she fought back tears. She couldn't cry. Crying would make him angry, and she needed to stay alert. The rest stop television mounted near the vending machines played a local news channel, the anchor's voice barely audible over the buzz of travelers. She wondered if her picture was already on the news. Would anyone even recognize her if it was? The man had made her change clothes at the first gas station they stopped at, and her normally loose hair was now tightly braided. A truck driver walked past their table, and she tried to make eye contact. She'd learned that hand signal from social media, the one that meant "help me," but she hadn't found the right moment to use it. The man barely took his eyes off her, and when he did, it was only to scan their surroundings with the watchfulness of a hawk. She could feel her phone in her backpack, now turned off. He'd let her keep it, probably because throwing it away might look suspicious, but he'd warned her what would happen if she tried to turn it on. "Remember, I know where your little brother goes to school," he'd said earlier, his voice soft but chilling. The afternoon heat made the air shimmer above the parking lot asphalt. Cars pulled in and out, their engines adding to the constant highway noise that seemed to isolate their picnic table in a bubble of sound. A line of ants marched determinedly across the concrete near her feet, and she focused on them, trying to stay calm. She'd learned about ants in science class, how they worked together, how they communicated danger to their colony. Right now, she felt like she was trying to send out the same kind of silent warning signals. More families crossed the parking lot towards the restrooms. More trucks rumbled past on the highway. More people walked by, everyone in their own bubble, no one noticing the silent plea in her eyes. But she knew she had to keep trying. Her mom always said she was the bravest person she knew, braver than her older cousins, braver than the kids at school who made fun of her stutter. Now she needed to be braver than ever. The man's phone buzzed again, and for a brief moment, his attention shifted to the screen. Her heart began to race. Maybe this would be her chance. She glanced around, hoping to see someone, anyone, who might understand what she was trying to say without words. There had to be someone who would notice. There had to be someone who would help. The old pickup truck pulled into the rest stop with a familiar crunch of gravel. The Marine had been driving for 6 hours straight, and his body was telling him it was time for a break. 3 tours overseas had taught him to listen to his instincts, whether they were about his own needs or about the situations around him. He parked away from the main cluster of cars, a habit he'd never quite shaken since his service days. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as he stepped out, stretching his stiff muscles. His boots hit the pavement with a solid thud, and he took a moment to survey his surroundings, another military habit that had stuck with him. The rest stop was like any other along the interstate, clean enough, busy with summer travelers, and filled with a constant hum of passing trucks. He'd stopped at dozens just like it during his drive home from base, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the way the sunset hit the windows, or maybe it was just his tired mind playing tricks on him. He grabbed his water bottle and headed toward the main building, his eyes automatically scanning faces and body language as he walked. That's when he noticed them, the girl in the yellow dress and the man at the picnic table. Most people wouldn't have given them a second glance, but 15 years of military service had trained him to notice what others missed. The girl sat too stiffly, her shoulders hunched in a way that spoke of fear rather than fatigue. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes, and his attention darted between his phone and their surroundings in a pattern that seemed rehearsed rather than random. It reminded him of surveillance techniques he'd seen in places he'd rather forget. He'd seen enough human trafficking briefings during his service to recognize the warning signs. The age gap, the mismatched body language, the way the man positioned himself to block the girl's exit route. It all added up to something that made his combat-trained instincts buzz with alarm. The Marine made his way to the vending machines, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. He bought a coffee he didn't really want, taking his time with each movement. Through the reflection in the vending machine's glass, he watched their interaction. The man's gestures seemed friendly enough, but there was something artificial about them, like an actor performing for an audience. A family with 3 kids walked past the table, their excited chatter about reaching Disney World floating through the evening air. The girl's eyes followed them with a longing that made his chest tighten. He'd seen that look before, in war-torn countries, in the eyes of children who needed help but couldn't ask for it. He pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages while maintaining peripheral vision on the table. His mind ran through possible scenarios, weighing options like he'd been trained to do. Direct confrontation could be dangerous. If the man was who he suspected he was, he might panic and do something desperate. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. The rest stop was getting busier as dinner time approached. More families pulled in, more trucks parked for their mandatory breaks, more travelers stretched their legs and checked their phones. The Marine watched a state trooper's car cruise past on the highway, and he noticed how the man at the table tensed slightly at the sight. Years of training had taught him to trust his gut while keeping his head cool. Something was definitely wrong here, but he needed to be smart about how he handled it. One wrong move could make things worse for the girl. He'd seen situations go bad in the blink of an eye, and he wasn't about to let that happen here. He moved to a nearby table, angling himself to maintain a clear view while appearing to be absorbed in his phone. His coffee sat untouched as he observed their interaction through the camera app, making it look like he was just another traveler taking a social media break. The man kept checking his watch, his movements becoming more agitated as the minutes ticked by. The girl's eyes darted around the rest stop, looking for something or someone. The Marine recognized that look too. It was the look of someone trying to signal for help without being noticed. His mind flashed back to his training about human trafficking indicators. The age difference, the control in behavior, the victim's restricted movement and nervous demeanor, it all fit the profile. But he needed to be absolutely certain before taking action. One detail caught his attention, the girl's backpack. She clutched it like a lifeline, her knuckles white against the fabric. That wasn't how kids usually held their bags during a normal family trip. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting orange light across the rest stop. More travelers came and went, but the Marine stayed focused, his senses alert for any change in the situation. He knew from experience that twilight was often when things happened, when people made their moves, thinking the growing shadows would cover their tracks. The moment finally came when the man's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening with concern. As he stood up to take the call, He moved a few steps away from the picnic table, just far enough that he could keep the girl in his sight while having a private conversation. His voice was low and tense as he spoke into the phone, his free hand clenching and unclenching at his side. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. This was her chance, maybe her only chance. She remembered the video she'd watched dozens of times on social media, the one about staying safe that her mom had shared in their family group chat. The hand signal had seemed so simple then, sitting safely in her bedroom. Now, with her hands trembling, it felt like the most difficult thing she'd ever done. She glanced around the rest stop, trying to appear casual. The Marine was still there, she noticed, sitting at his table with a coffee cup he hadn't touched. Something about his alertness, the way he carried himself, reminded her of her uncle who'd served in the military. He seemed to be the only person really watching, really seeing. Taking a deep breath, she slowly raised her hand, pretending to brush back her hair. 3 fingers up, just like in the video. Her heart was beating so fast, she thought it might burst out of her chest. The man was still on his phone, his back partially turned, but she knew she had to be careful. One wrong move and everything would get worse. Palm facing out, the way the video had shown. Then, like closing a door in slow motion, she folded her thumb across her palm. Every movement felt like it was taking forever, but she knew she had to make it clear. This wasn't just a random gesture, it was a cry for help. The Marine sat up straighter, his coffee forgotten. She saw the slight change in his posture and knew he'd recognized the signal. Years of watching people's body language in dangerous situations made him instantly alert to her subtle movements. He didn't react obviously or jump up, which would have given everything away. Instead, he maintained his casual appearance while his mind quickly processed what he'd just witnessed. The final part of the signal, fingers folding down over the thumb, making a fist. She completed the movement just as the man turned back toward her, quickly pretending to adjust her dress. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the picnic table to steady them. "Everything okay, sweetie?" the man asked as he returned, his voice carrying an edge that wasn't there before. The phone call had obviously upset him, and she could see the tension in his jaw as he sat back down. Yes, she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the highway noise. But inside, her mind was racing. Had the Marine understood? Would he know what to do? Or had she just made everything worse? The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the rest stop. More cars were pulling in as the evening rush hour approached. The air felt electric with tension, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. She kept her eyes down, focused on her untouched sandwich, while every nerve in her body screamed for help. The Marine had shifted positions slightly, maintaining his casual appearance while reaching for his phone. His movements were deliberate and calm, years of training evident in how naturally he handled the situation. To anyone else, he looked like just another traveler checking his messages, but he was already putting a plan into action. The man across from her seemed more agitated now, checking his watch repeatedly. The phone call had clearly changed something in his plans. He started gathering their things, stuffing trash into a paper bag with jerky movements that betrayed his growing anxiety. "We need to get going," he said, his voice tight with forced cheerfulness. "Want to get to the next stop before it gets too dark." But the girl could hear the urgency beneath his words, the barely contained tension that made her stomach knot with fear. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching out like honey dripping from a spoon. The girl could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that everything depended on what happened next. She'd done what she could, made the signal she'd learned about, hoped it had been seen and understood. Now all she could do was wait and pray that help was coming. The rest stop continued its steady stream of travelers. Families heading home from vacation, truckers starting their night routes, couples walking their dogs in the grassy area. None of them knew they were in the middle of a silent crisis, a desperate plea for help playing out right in front of them. But one person had noticed. One person had seen. And that person knew exactly what to do next. The Marine's phone felt heavy in his hand as he typed out a careful message to rest stop security. Every word was chosen deliberately, his military training kicking in as he described the situation without causing panic. He knew that in situations like this, chaos was the enemy. Keep it controlled, keep it quiet, keep everyone safe. He watched through his peripheral vision as the man grew more agitated, his movements becoming sharper, more urgent. The girl's signal had been clear as day to someone with his training, the same signal he'd learned about during his last deployment briefing on human trafficking. Now it was time to put that training into action. Rising casually from his table, the Marine stretched as if he'd been sitting too long. He moved toward the vending machines, positioning himself to block any quick exit to the parking lot. His movements were natural, unhurried, just another tired traveler getting a snack. But his mind was racing through scenarios, planning 3 steps ahead like a chess player. The rest stop's security officer, a retired sheriff's deputy, received his message and responded immediately. They'd worked out a simple code system months ago for situations exactly like this. One message, and the carefully planned rescue protocol quietly kicked into action. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. More travelers were pulling in for their evening breaks, creating a steady flow of movement that worked to their advantage. The Marine noticed a young couple in hiking gear position themselves near the restroom entrance, plainclothes officers who'd arrived so smoothly that even he almost missed their appearance. He kept his posture relaxed, his movements casual as he bought a bag of chips he didn't want. Through the vending machine's reflection, he could see 2 more officers taking up positions near the parking lot exits. They looked like ordinary travelers checking their phones or maps, but he recognized the subtle way they positioned themselves, creating an invisible net around the area. The man at the picnic table was getting ready to leave, gathering their things with quick, nervous movements. The girl's face had gone pale, but she kept her composure. The Marine silently commended her bravery. Staying calm in a crisis was something even trained soldiers struggled with sometimes. Highway patrol cars were quietly taking up positions on both sides of the rest stop exits, far enough away to not raise alarm, but close enough to respond in seconds. The net was tightening, but timing would be crucial. Move too soon, and the situation could escalate dangerously. Move too late, and they might lose their chance. The Marine pulled out his phone again, this time appearing to take a call. His quiet words into the phone were actually updating the security team about the suspect's movements. Each word was chosen carefully, painting a picture for the response team without drawing attention. More families pulled into the rest stop, the dinner hour bringing a new wave of travelers. The Marine noticed how the officers smoothly adapted their positions, using the increased foot traffic as cover. It was like watching a well-rehearsed dance, each person knowing their role perfectly. The girl's backpack was still clutched tightly in her hands as she stood up from the table. The man put his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that might have looked fatherly to others, but the Marine could see her slight flinch. Every instinct told him to move in now, but he held back. Patience had saved his life more than once in combat, and it would be crucial here too. The security team had positioned themselves perfectly, covering all exits while maintaining their casual appearances. 2 more officers had arrived, dressed as maintenance workers checking the outdoor lighting as the day grew darker. The trap was set, but they needed the perfect moment to spring it. Through his earpiece, the Marine could hear the quiet coordination of the response team. Highway patrol had stopped a suspicious vehicle matching their criteria 2 miles down the road, possibly an accomplice. Everything needed to happen simultaneously to prevent any chance of escape or warning. The man was starting to walk toward the parking lot, the girl following with small, reluctant steps. The Marine moved too, maintaining his position to block any sudden rush to the cars. Years of training had taught him to read body language like a book, and right now, every page was screaming that this was the crucial moment. The rest stop's atmosphere changed subtly as plainclothes officers moved into position. To regular travelers, nothing seemed unusual, just people getting coffee, checking maps, or walking their dogs. But beneath this ordinary scene, a carefully coordinated rescue operation was unfolding. 2 highway patrol officers, dressed in casual summer clothes, stood near the ice machine, pretending to fill their coolers. Their radios were hidden but active, carrying whispered updates about the situation. Behind them, a local police unit had quietly positioned their unmarked car at the far end of the parking lot, engine running but lights off. The sun had almost set now, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. The rest stop's lights flickered on automatically, casting long shadows across the pavement. More officers arrived in waves, each blending perfectly into the evening crowd of tired travelers. A woman in a floral dress was actually a tactical response expert. The elderly couple studying a map were both decorated detectives. Through their earpieces, they all heard the Marine's quiet updates. His military experience proved invaluable as he described the suspect's movements in clear, precise terms. The girl was still clutching her backpack, her steps becoming slower as they approached the parking lot. The man's grip on her shoulder had tightened, supple, but noticeable to trained eyes. The rest stop's security cameras swiveled silently, tracking every movement. In the security office, monitors showed multiple angles of the scene. A dispatcher coordinated with additional units stationed on both highway exits, ready to prevent any escape attempt. They'd done this before, but every case was different, every moment crucial. A truck driver, actually an undercover state trooper, started his engine, strategically blocking one of the parking lot exits. Another officer, dressed as a maintenance worker, wheeled his cart of cleaning supplies closer to the second exit. The net was tightening, but timing would be everything. The girl's eyes darted around, noticing the subtle changes in her surroundings. She saw the Marine still nearby, his presence somehow reassuring. She didn't know about the dozen other officers in position, but she sensed something was different. The man holding her shoulder sensed it too. His movements became more anxious, his head turning quickly at every sound. Inside the rest stop building, more officers waited. They'd cleared the area of regular travelers as smoothly as water flowing around rocks. Families were quietly directed to the far side of the building, children guided away without causing alarm. The staff, briefed on the situation, continued their normal routines while keeping exits clear. The highway patrol captain, dressed in jeans and a tourist t-shirt, gave the final signal. It was a simple gesture, just reaching up to adjust his baseball cap. But it set everything in motion. The response had to be swift, coordinated, and above all, safe for the young girl caught in the middle. Officers moved with practiced precision, their casual poses transforming into professional stances in seconds. The man's escape routes disappeared as police vehicles smoothly pulled into position. The maintenance worker's cart, the truck blocking the exit, the tourists with their maps. Suddenly the random patterns made sense, revealing a perfect tactical formation. The girl felt the man's grip tighten even more as he realized what was happening. But before he could react, before he could make any dangerous moves, the trap was sprung. Officers seemed to materialize from every direction, their movements swift but controlled. No sirens, no shouting, no chaos, just the smooth professional execution of a carefully planned operation. The Marine watched as his military training merged perfectly with law enforcement expertise. He'd seen similar operations overseas, but this one was different. This wasn't about capturing an enemy, it was about saving a child. Every officer moved with this understanding that actions firm but careful, designed to end the situation without causing additional trauma. Two female officers quickly separated the girl from the man, gently guiding her to safety. Their movements were practiced, caring. They'd handled situations like this before and knew exactly how to make a frightened child feel secure. The rest of the team moved in precise formation, securing the suspect with professional efficiency. The evening crowd of travelers, kept at a safe distance, barely realized what had happened. To them, it might have looked like a minor incident, quickly resolved. But for those involved, it was the culmination of perfect timing, careful planning, and the coordinated efforts of dozens of trained professionals. The rest stop returned to its normal rhythm, but everything had changed. Where moments before there had been danger hidden in plain sight, now there was safety. The girl's backpack, still clutched in her hands, finally loosened as she realized it was over. The Marine watched as she was led to a warm, well-lit office where caring professionals waited to help her begin her journey home. The moment of intervention played out like a perfectly choreographed dance. Officers moved in from all directions, their movements swift but controlled. The man's face shifted from confusion to panic as he realized what was happening. But before he could react, two officers were already beside him, their hands firm but professional as they separated him from the girl. "Step away from the child, sir," one officer said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. The man tried to protest, reaching for his pocket, but the officers were ready. In seconds, they had him secured, their movements precise and practiced. No violence, no shouting, just the quiet efficiency of well-trained professionals doing their job. The girl stood frozen for a moment, her backpack still clutched tightly. A female officer in plain clothes gently approached her, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she said softly. "You did so well with that signal. You're very brave." The Marine watched from his position, staying back now that the professionals had taken over. He could see the relief washing over the girl's face as the reality of rescue began to sink in. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, not tears of fear this time, but of relief. Inside the rest stop building, a team of specially trained counselors had already set up in the manager's office. They transformed the space into a comfortable, safe environment for the girl. Soft chairs, warm lighting, and even a few stuffed animals created a gentle atmosphere away from the chaos outside. The man's true identity began to emerge as officers ran his information. Multiple warrants appeared on their screens. He was wanted in 3 states. The officers' faces grew grimmer as they read the details, but they maintained their professionalism. The suspect was quickly moved to a waiting police vehicle away from the girl's sight. More police units arrived, their lights flashing silently in the growing darkness. The rest stop remained open, but officers carefully directed other travelers away from the scene. Regular folks going about their evening had no idea they'd witnessed the end of a multi-state manhunt. The girl sat in the office now, wrapped in a soft blanket someone had brought. Her hands shook as she held a cup of hot chocolate, but her voice grew stronger as she spoke to the gentle counselor beside her. She described her home, her family, the moment she was taken, each detail carefully noted by the officers present. Pictures of the girl were quickly matched with missing person reports. Her mother had been searching frantically for days, working with police, posting on social media, praying for any sign of her daughter. Now, officers made the call they loved most, telling a parent their child was safe. The Marine gave his statement to the investigators, explaining how he'd noticed the signs, recognized the signal, and alerted authorities. The officers nodded with respect. His quick thinking and careful approach had been crucial. Too often, these situations ended differently. But today, everything had gone right. Outside, the summer night had fully settled in. The rest stop lights cast a gentle glow over the scene as the last police units finished their work. Regular travelers began returning to the main building, unaware of the small miracle that had just occurred. The girl's bravery, the Marine's vigilance, and the officer's professionalism had combined to change the course of a young life. In the office, the girl finally smiled as she heard her mother's voice on the phone. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. The counselor beside her dabbed at her own eyes. These moments never got easier, never became routine. Each rescue was special, each child precious. The investigation would continue for weeks. Evidence would be gathered, statements taken, connections to other cases discovered. But for now, in this moment, everyone focused on one simple truth. A child was going home. The rest stop returned to its normal rhythm of travelers coming and going, but for those who knew what had happened here, it would forever be the place where awareness, training, and compassion combined to save a life. The reunion happened at the local police station just before midnight. The mother burst through the doors, her eyes scanning frantically until she spotted her daughter. They ran to each other, colliding in an embrace that spoke more than words ever could. Officers and staff members nearby wiped away tears. These moments made all their hard work worthwhile. The girl's little brother was there too, half asleep but refusing to stay home. He hugged his sister tightly, his small hands clutching her yellow dress. The family counselor watched with a gentle smile, knowing the healing process was already beginning. They were together again. That was the first and most important step. The Marine had stayed to give his final statement. As he watched the family reunion from a distance, a deep sense of satisfaction settled over him. His training had taught him to notice things others might miss, but this was different from any mission he completed overseas. This was about bringing a family back together. News of the rescue spread quickly through law enforcement channels. The men's arrest led to breakthroughs in several other missing persons cases. Investigators discovered connections to a larger network, and within days, more children were found and returned to their families. It was like pulling a thread that unraveled an entire sweater of criminal activity. The story caught media attention, but reporters handled it sensitively. They'd focused on the importance of knowing safety signals and being aware of surroundings. The girl's mother spoke briefly, not about the trauma, but about the hope their story could help others. "Learn these signals," she said, her voice strong despite her tears. "They could save someone you love." Schools across the country began incorporating safety signal education into their programs. The simple hand gesture that had saved one girl's life was now being taught to thousands of children. Teachers worked with counselors to present the information in a way that empowered rather than frightened their students. The rest stop became a model for safety awareness. New cameras were installed, staff received additional training, and a subtle but effective system of safety measures was implemented. Other highway stops across the country began adopting similar protocols. Small changes that could make huge differences in people's lives. The Marine returned to his regular life, but something had changed. He started volunteering at local safety awareness programs, teaching people about the signs he'd noticed that day. His military experience, combined with this civilian rescue, gave him a unique perspective that helped others understand the importance of staying alert and taking action. 3 months after the rescue, the girl and her family attended a private ceremony at the police station. The Marine was there too, along with the officers and staff who had helped that day. The girl, stronger now but still carrying the memory of that day, handed out thank you cards she had made herself. Each one contained a pressed yellow flower, the same color as the dress she had worn. The investigation continued to expand, leading to more arrests and more families reunited. The men's phone had contained valuable information that helped law enforcement track down others involved in similar crimes. Each discovery, each rescue, traced back to that moment at the rest stop when someone noticed something wrong and decided to act. Community awareness programs sprung up across the country. The story became a powerful example of how ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. The Marines' role highlighted how civilian vigilance, combined with professional response, could save lives. People began paying more attention to their surroundings, looking out for each other in ways they hadn't before. 1 year later, the girl stood before a group of students at her school, sharing her story. Her voice was steady as she demonstrated the hand signal that had saved her life. "Don't be afraid to use it," she told them. "Don't be afraid to notice it. Sometimes the smallest action can change everything." The impact rippled outward like waves in a pond. More safety protocols were established, more people learned the signals, more lives were saved. What happened at that rest stop became more than just a successful rescue. It became a movement of awareness, vigilance, and hope. A reminder that in a world that sometimes seemed dark, there were always people willing to notice, to care, and to act.